Okay, welcome back. Welcome back to our next segment called The Need for Impact Investment. And we're going to talk about the need for funding for companies that can create a sustainable business model, sort of going off on what we just spoke about. So we have here Emma Englén, Sustainability Manager at Spiltan Fonder, Jonas Nordlander, Investor and part-time resident at Ute, and our own Thomas Hjelm from Initiative Ute for your added perspective. Jonas, I thought I'd start with you, just talking about the definition of impact in investment, and how would you define it, and how big part of your work as an investor is in that realm?
So how would I define impact investment? I think as a sort of, I'm pretty new to sort of the investment field, but me and my best friend and partner, we have sort of a fund which is quite large. It's not actually a fund. We're investing from our own balance sheet through a company. And as an entrepreneur, I start with people. So it's not really, there has to be an idea that is not completely wrong. And I think in the early days of our investment thesis, it was about finding a good company. And that was not always a sustainable company. But I think me and a lot of people around me who have created a lot of wealth very quickly are approaching investments in a different way than perhaps earlier generations did. And I think we feel a lot of, now talking not only for myself and for Philip, who I'm doing this with, I think we feel a lot of responsibility, which is to a certain extent burdensome, because we get contact. If you have money, you get. Louise talk about the money, and you get a lot of people who wants to talk to you, and being sort of partly an introvert person, it's you don't want to talk to everyone, but at the same, or at least not in certain ways.
So how do you make the investment decisions now? Has that changed, and what kind of criteria are you looking for?
Definitely. We have done about 30 investments, and we're, I think, sort of larger than Spiltan, but we're 2 people and we have two employees. So it's a very small operation, and we make all the decisions ourselves. And I think we have just sort of during the last 2 years really started to look at sort of the investment part of what we do in a way where we want to leave something behind for our children, where we can sort of look them in the eye and say, this is something that you could manage either actively or inactively, but that we believe is something that will have an impact for the future. And that's, for me, it's quite new. I've sold my company 2 years ago. I got some money sort of during the last 5 years. So it's, but we have done a lot, and we have, so there's an investment leg, there's sort of a philanthropic leg, and then there's a sort of a crazy risk leg where we do stuff which is sort of an investment, but more on the crazy level.
We're going to come back to the philanthropic leg of it in our next segment, and we're going to keep you on. But I'm curious, so in terms of companies that you invest in that have sort of a positive impact, can you give some examples?
We have done 3 investments in food waste. We have one investment into a vegan company. It's a UK-based company. We have a French company called BlaBlaCar, which is trying to redefine transport in a more efficient way. There's a pretty wide range. We're also looking at social companies where we're trying to help people integrate into society, and this is sort of a mix of philanthropy and investments. So we actually own shares, but we're looking at journalism, believe that sort of spreading free word, and this is also sort of an investment, but also philanthropic. So it's and there's a few others. I think it's a bit of how you define it. The company that I founded and sold, I think, has a huge impact in terms of what it does for both for individuals and companies and for sort of the greater good. So this is like a Blocket, but a very large version of Blocket. So it's a circular economy in the essence of it.
Emma, I'm going to bring you in here, and your work as sustainability manager for Spiltan Fonder. Actually, you are also part-time, which we didn't know when we recruited you as a speaker. You also live here on Ute part-time, which was very fun. So when we asked to book a room for you, you said we didn't need to because you had a house here. So all roads lead here somehow. But I'm curious, in your work with managing this fund and trying to find companies, what are some of the criteria that you are using? How does that process, what does it look like?
Yeah, I would like to take a step back. For you who doesn't know Spiltan Fonder, it's of course a lot more institutional. So without me sounding too institutional, we have certain processes basically for our investments. And I always struggle actually with the difference in between what is impact investing or investing with impact. And I think we at Spiltan Fonder do the later. The most important thing in theory is for us to, in our investment process, basically set up certain steps, how to build your funds. And you can do that, which I know a lot of other funds are doing, is by just not, invest in certain companies, in certain sectors, or, companies that just doesn't, strive for the same thing as you do, called exclusions, basically. And if exclusions would be the only way of driving sustainability, that would be really simple. But actually, exclusions doesn't drive sustainability anywhere, because without, investments, you don't have a fund, right? so it's But it's one step of the way. The second thing we do is basically deselect companies, and that is. The choice with selection is quite interesting because it's a difference in between excluding things and just deselect things. Deselect things could be during a reselection of, keeping a company within the fund. And that means that you see that this company might not, you just don't follow the same road, basically, of where you want to head in terms of sustainability. The company might be performing well, which is always a hard, goodbye. But you need to take these actions to sort of sustainability align your fund. And then you have the third step, which is select or reselect companies. And reselecting companies you do with several aspects as well, of course. It could be companies, striving for the same things as you want, setting the same goals. Maybe they've done sustainability already as one of their, progressive and successful business stories. And those companies are the ones that every fund company wants to have. So the model in theory looks really simple, right? But it's really hard in reality.
So I'm curious, how does this how is this received from the private investors? Is this in demand, so to speak? Is this something you feel like you really need to do?
Definitely. I think it's sustainability. I don't think we need to mention that or discuss that too long, because I think we all agree that it's here to stay. Everyone is demanding this from private customers, and Spiltan Fonder has around 500,000 plus private customers it's hard to count because sometimes they have accounts on Nordnet, Avanza, it's a lot of different platforms. But more than 500,000 private customers. And the interest in sustainability has never been this big. So it's a very positive trend.
Do you see the same, Jonas, from your perspective? Is it driven by the consumer?
Definitely. I mean, it's the consumer. It's also the employees of the companies, which is, I think, again, if you're used today coming out from a good university, you're in high demand on the work market. You're not gonna work for certain companies, and you're gonna do a lot more due diligence before you sign up. And then you have investors. I mean, they're definitely looking a lot more at this now. And obviously, I mean, from my perspective, we don't have to answer to anyone. So it's more to ourselves, looking ourselves in the mirror. And here, I think we're going to be in a process of deselecting in terms of sort of very successful investments that we've made, but maybe not companies that I will be proud sitting and talking to my hopefully grandchildren one day and say, sure. I invest in this company, and they will say, oh. And that's I think what I'm hoping to do, and I hope a lot of other young entrepreneurs who have or are about to be successful will do as well. And I think it's going to be a huge change.
But do you see it in the companies that you are invested in that I mean, they are targeting consumers that are more conscious about sustainability and so forth?
It goes through also, I mean, these companies, most of them are non-public, and it's still extremely, I mean, they're extremely agile to this. And I mean, being in a non-public environment, you can change your rules and the way you do conduct business very quickly. I mean, part of it, I would say, is sort of, you come up with something which could be called greenwashing, but I think at the end of the day, there is a willingness and the need, because they understand that to survive, you have to do this. And this, I would say, it goes through all of these companies, small and large, that we have invested into.
We talked before about the sort of the role of the private sector versus the public sector in some of these issues. And just going back to what we spoke about in the last session, do you have any reflections there? Can companies do good? Can companies have a real impact?
I believe companies will have a greater impact than governments. I think they are. You have. So you have the philanthropic part of what we can do, which is extremely small globally. And then you have governments, I mean, and that's big infrastructure changes, but companies are the drivers of change. I think that's, and they can be squeezed and into different, but that's really coming from sort of debates like this and the debate that's been going on for several years. I think people are, everything from global companies down to small companies are feeling sort of the squeeze and realize that this is something that needs to be done. And I think in Sweden, there's a lot of cooperations with governments as well that we don't know of right now, but I think we will be aware of quite soon in very large investments. We look at sort of infrastructure for electricity, green electricity I mean, this is not, it's difficult to be a politician. And I believe that sort of the corporate world plays an enormous role in sort of setting the stage for the future.
Yeah, and is that because there are there's an upside in terms of profits to gain, or is it because there is so much money floating around in sort of the private sector in terms of investment that there's an opportunity now to go for sort of more infrastructure type investments?
I think it's about survival. So and this is the way companies work. I mean, they're sort of a living organism, and they look at the environment, they look at the future, and they look at sort of this longevity. Maybe it's not 100 years like Louise mentioned, but I think they're like sharks, but in a good way when it comes to this. So they really sort of look at, can we sustain our business selling something or providing this service if clients really call us out on this. And we talked about this earlier. Harvard made this sort of magic machine where they can calculate sort of comparisons between companies and their impact. And I think this is going to be evident in funds. They're not going to be able to, buyers of these funds will demand to see that, you're above or below this score. And the consumers are going to ask a lot more questions and are asking a lot more questions. And then companies have to adapt or die.
Right, adapt or die. Emma, any thoughts when you hear?
I'm thinking with politicians still. They still have a very important role to play. Regulation is one of the main things that has to be driven, and it has to be driven in a faster pace than it does today. Because from the corporate perspective, I see that companies today, they need to act much faster to be able to live up to all these, primarily our global sustainability goals. And regulation is definitely not catching up with that. And regulation could actually, if they catch up, they could also lead, and sort of form a landscape which is more easy for companies to navigate in. So yeah, just adding that. But I also believe that companies are the biggest enabler for reaching the global goals.
So because they are faster or more agile, or?
Because they have the impact, both the negative and the positive, and they're the only ones to change it. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. Thomas, I wanted to bring you up here, and we have to admit you're sort of a stand-in because we had Rickard Englén who had to cancel. But I thought it would be fun to hear. Yeah, sorry about that. But I thought it would be interesting to bring in your perspective because you are really the one in initiative that is most used to getting the funds, both from a private sector and a public sector. And I know this plays a very particular role, as we mentioned before, the public sector is important in the beginning, but the private sector is more important when you're up and running.
Yes, I have been thinking about an example.
Yeah.
Maybe I can take that. We are an organization, we don't have our own money, so we can say we go for the OPM concept, other people's money. So if I want to build a wetland, I say in this period some funds are available to look for money, and the cost for me is 100. And this fund can give me 80%. And many times they say you have to find 10% from another official source, and you have to put in 10% yourself, private money. So there you have the concept. So if I find public money 90%, I cannot run the project if I don't have the 10%. So in the beginning, that money is very important. What you asked me for is when we have run the project, everything is okay. Then we have to operate the wetlands or something. Then we don't have any public money for that. Then we need the private money to do that.
And then you buy me lunch.
Yeah. Or a sausage.
There you go. And how do you see, are private companies more open to doing these types of maybe not you call it investments or investing in your operation?
Yes, it's growing interest. Like Media told you before, they are one of the donators, and we have had some companies coming here that they really want to do something good for the Baltic Sea. And that's a part of the company's process to do this. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's changing. We can feel it's changing. Really, it's a new attitude, and I think it's everybody among us. We can see really we have reached a level where we have to go deeper to do something, because if we don't do it, we can see we have stepped over some threshold. If you don't do it.
But I also think it's worth mentioning, I mean, the work that you've been doing, you've been at this for many years. Yeah. I mean, you spent, like you said, years just having meetings with municipalities and sort of private individuals and locals on the island, and along that way, you met so many people and you spread the word about what you're doing. gotten people out of the island, and it's like, I mean, it's really like building a business. It takes time. You know, it's so I think you're now getting to a tipping point where this is actually really turning into something which is sort of worthwhile, and we'll see that with the 3 wetlands here, and then you have, you know, there's a lot of other islands, and this is hard work and time.
Is there any questions from the audience to the panel? We have several. Okay, Emilia?
This is maybe not a question, but one thing I think that you are doing so great, Thomas and Robert, is that you are so passionate when you communicate about the project. And this is something that I would also like to stress further, sort of, because we have seen so many fantastic projects here today being presented. And I think when you go out and sort of try to get closer to companies or big investors. Big investors, it's so much about the communication. And you want to see in the communication that passion that you're always sharing with everybody. I think it's really crucial in what you're doing. So it was not the question. It was just one.
I think it's welcome. Louise?
No, I think it would just be interesting if you could share some perspective or thoughts around how could you raise the awareness to public opinion and to normal people, you know, people on this island and people around, for them to be part of change? And what do you think is needed for that to be visualized? I think what I'm seeing is that a lot of people, they want to become activists in a simple way by starting eating less meat or you know, buying new cars, etc. So what do you think about that in relation to your investments and how you drive them, and also for Thomas then for the next step for everybody on this island and all other islanders being willing to be part of change and also maybe invest in change?
Was that for Thomas or?
For everybody.
It was for everybody.
Makes it difficult. Thomas.
We have a lot of people come down to the wetland, and we have guided tours. We inform them, and what we notice is that when we tell them that the pike is so important for the Baltic Sea, after some days they say we have been out fishing, but we put back the pike. So that's a small thing, but it's so important. So information, just because people say we didn't know. So we have to be better in communication, really.
Right.
Hello, my name is Gustav Almqvist. I'm working at the County Administrative Board of Stockholm. So I'm representing the regional authority in this case then. So I just want to say that thanks for really good discussion and so on. And I think our responsibility from the public sector as well is to really guide you and facilitate people to find the public funds, because there are many. I mean, we're talking about wetlands and restorations of waterways and so on. There are many funds available actually, and you should know that we talked about during the break before about the importance of communication between us at Stockholms Länsstyrelse, for example, and people in the region. And this is a really important thing to stress here as well, I think.
Thank you. We actually have to move on to our next segment. So Emilia, Jonas, Thomas, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Round of applause.